Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast. I'm Aaron Brightman, coming to you a few hours, about 3 hours after Rutgers got thoroughly dominated by number 24 Illinois, 76-58. Very, 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 very disappointing in every single way. Rutgers got beat in every way. They got out hustled. The toughness factor, the physicality, complete opposite of the way they've played Illinois at the rack the last three times, where they've done that to them. And so I don't think the loss is as disappointing as the way in which they lost. And credit to them for fighting back at the end of the first half. But you can't start down 14-2. That was just really disheartening. And it was also, I think, and Peichel talked about it in the postgame, just, they missed shots and it impacted their defense. And people talk about the Peichel culture in terms of defense, rebounding. But the other part of that is that Rutgers is always at its best offensively when it's coming from their defense. And they're just in a better flow. And I think part of it was strategic tonight. I think the intention to get Cliff the ball in the post makes sense and worked to a degree, in the sense of, I think they were trying to get Dungeon in foul trouble, which they did. They were trying to establish an inside presence, and they were trying to work inside out. And they were hoping that it would open things up on the perimeter. And Cliff, unfortunately, he had one of his worst games. He was unable to finish at the rim. He had two missed dunks, one of which in the second half was symbolically perfect in terms of, he dunked it and it still went out. It rimmed out. And I think what happened was, when Hyatt missed a couple shots early, they fell into the Illinois trap. Is what Illinois does. They force you into ISO and they get you to take one-on-one, go one-on-one and take bad shots. And Rutgers fell into that trap. And I think they got stagnant. They did not move the ball the way they have in recent games. They did not share the ball as well. It was way too much one-on-one tonight. And in terms of just attacking the rim, it was predictable, and it was a little bit of isolation, and they weren't kicking out to the perimeter the way I thought that would be there for them. And also, the wings are just very stagnant too. There's not a lot of movement. There's not a lot of cutting. They just were very one-dimensional, and trying to feed Cliff time after time in the post just wasn't working. So I think that this is a big, and listen, Illinois is really good. So it's not like this happened to against the bottom four team in the Big Ten. That's not what happened here tonight. And I definitely thought there was a good chance they could lose in this game. I mentioned in the preview, rebounding was a huge concern, and they got walloped, 55-27. Minus 28 rebounding margin is brutal. And I think Illinois had more offensive rebounds than Rutgers had defensive, which is kind of hard to do. And that was the case. Offensive rebounds, Illinois had 19. Rutgers only had 18 defensive rebounds. So that tells you a lot. Amazingly, again, Illinois only had 14 second chance points. I mean, this could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. And Rutgers has been fortunate this whole season because they've been getting beat on the boards against everyone, even the low majors. And the second chance points margin is not that great. It should be greater. They are, and part of that is their 2-point defense, but not tonight. Not tonight. Illinois shot, was it 50? It was close to 50. Let's see. What did Illinois shoot from two? They shot 47%, 21-45. Rutgers coming in was top 5 in terms of number 2 in 2-point defense in the country. So that was obviously a product of the schedule. But I think that Rutgers did also just play really poorly. They did go into his zone a little bit. The press worked at times. Listen, they were down 14-2. They were down 30-15. Austin Williams did an amazing job tonight. He woke them up, and again, it came off the defense. They had that full court press. He got the steal and made the basket, got the foul, hit the free throw. That got them going, and he had a tremendous first half. He had 9 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists at the half. But he sparked that comeback, and it came off the defensive end. And Illinois was turning it over. I mean, they forced 17 turnovers to Illinois. That's about as good as you could hope. But they also, again, weren't able to take advantage of it enough. 18 points off of turnovers on 17. That's not so efficient. They had an 18-12 edge on points off of turnovers. They were -7 in, they had +7 in turnover margin. They had 10, which wasn't bad. Rutgers hasn't turned the ball over a lot this year, and Illinois wasn't good at doing so. Rutgers was 6 of 13 from 3. That's very good. They'll take that every game. But they were 30% from 2-point range. Now, Illinois was number 1 in 2-point defense coming in, but they were 9 of 23 on layups. Again, we talked about Cliff, but it was multiple players just not being able to score at the rim. And it wasn't in the flow of the offense. When you're not attacking in the flow of the offense, that's exactly what Illinois gets you to do. And it was a real struggle, and it was very frustrating to watch. But I thought it was just more disheartening to see that they were getting out hustled on loose balls. Their will was getting beat on the boards, and they were just unable to. In the second half, they had momentum at the end of the first half. They come out of the second half and they can't hit a shot. And I think they started like 2 of 12 or something from the floor. And it just took the wind out of their sails, and Illinois took off, and the rack, the crowd was awesome in the first half and had nothing to cheer about in the second half. And it's really unfortunate. A lot of people had a bad shooting night. And I think it was just because they never got into the flow of the offense. Transition wise, they got out a little bit. They scored 15 transition points, which honestly for Rutgers, the way this team is, it's not enough to be successful. They had a 15-12 edge of fast break points. They lost points in the paint, 40-26. They only had 9 assists on the game. Just not close to good enough. Also in the first half, Rutgers, even though they came back, they were in the bonus really early, and they missed some front-end one-on-ones. They missed some free throws. It was just really frustrating to see. And I think that this team has to figure out their identity, right? And has to figure out, I think Gavin Griffiths has to play more. He did have 2 threes late in the game, but it's time. It's time to, the whole working him in thing. I get it. I do understand that. But they have to find a place for him offensively to be a priority, because he's arguably their most skilled offensive player. Simpson and Fernandez, did not have their best games at all. They hit their only 3-point attempts, which is the only shots they made. They combined for 0 of 9 from 2-point range. They were 2 of 2 from 3. So, they weren't involved enough. I just think, strategically, listen, I would have loved to see Cliff have a big game, but he just did not. And he was 3 of 10 from the floor. Hyatt was 3 of 11. But I think that it disrupted the flow of the offense, and they have to go back to the drawing board on that. I think the coaching staff has to strategize on how, the good news is this coming week now, 2 road games, crucial for sure. But you're playing 2 teams that don't have that type of. First of all, Terrence Shannon is amazing. I think he's probably the second best player in the Big Ten, aside from Tyson Walker at Michigan State, and he played like it. He dominated. What did he finish with? It was something big. It was over 20 points. He had 23 points on 8 of 13 from the floor, 4 of 7 from 3. He had 10 rebounds, 3 assists. So he dominated. Rutgers didn't have anyone that was close to that. But these 2 games coming up, Wake Forest, Seton Hall will not be easy at any point, but they don't have the type of rim defense. They don't have the type of interior presence that Illinois has. So I think it looks like Rutgers is going to struggle against those types of teams. I mean, they have to figure it out. Cliff, I've said from day one, in terms of just getting him in motion, getting him in space, getting him rolling to the rim off screens, in transition. I don't think he's going to be at the level they need him to be if they're going to just use him as a traditional post player. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's happening. And I think they have to adjust. I think it's admirable that they've tried. And, I'm not saying you give up entirely, but I think it's got to be a little bit more of a balance. And I do. I think that, you know, continuing to feed him the way they did in the first half, they got out of the flow, and the guards have to create, and it's got to come naturally. And I think Cliff needs to be involved more organically and not force fed. And I think that that's a lesson that they'll take away from tonight. I hope so. And it's not, I guess, faulting them for it. It's more of just this didn't work, and how can we get better from this? And Derek and Noah have to be the guys that are able to create offense for themselves and for their teammates. And Gavin's got to be out there. He's going to be their best shooter, I think. And he looked poised in the moments he played. Granted, a lot of it was in the second half when they were down, but I think it's time to really get him, make him a priority. Obviously, Moat Mag did not play tonight, so that was a part of it as well. And this team is not going to be a finished product of whatever they're going to be until he's back. But Austin Williams too, he brought a lot tonight, and he didn't. He got caught in the ISO game a little bit in that second half. He didn't score in the second half, but listen, he took 6 shots. I can live with that. He was 3 of 6. He wasn't nearly as effective in the second half. But what he was able to do in the first half, and also his defensive versatility, and he's a smart player. He's an experienced player. He needs to get more minutes too. I did think JaMychal Davis gave them a spark at times. He was 1 of 6 from the floor. Oscar was 2 of 2. Wolf too. I think they need to get Wolf more involved. He can't just be. I mean, he's an elite screener. I think that he is a smart player. I think he's got to be more of a focal point in what they're doing too. I think he played a good amount. Minutes were pretty evenly distributed tonight, but I just think that they need to relook at how they're approaching things, especially now that the competition is ramping up. I think Wake Forest and Seton Hall are 2 huge opportunities on the road. Whether they're quad 1 or quad 2, the net rankings come out on Monday, so it'll be interesting to see where Rutgers shakes out. I would say somewhere in the 50 to 75 range probably. Right now they dropped in KenPom after this loss to 63, and Princeton won again today, by the way, by 1 point over Furman, which is a good team. They're 136 in KenPom. They were like 120 something before that game, but they are struggling offensively. They're shooting really poorly, and it's not just about finishing in the rim. It's not just about layups. It's about in the flow of the offense, and they need more shooters that can not only just 3, but mid-range, and Gavin is your best guy to do that. So I'm really harping on that. But I think Mag too, obviously, will help balance out the rotation whenever he does return. I do think he's close. And he was doing a full warm-up in this game. But I think overall, it was just disheartening to see the way they got beat. And the good news is it is a veteran team, mostly. And I talked about in the first game, this was the first big game, first big rack game, first Big Ten game for a lot of guys on the roster. And that includes the veterans in terms of Austin Williams, Noah Fernandez, J. Mike and Griffiths. And, this has to be a positive learning experience for them because they got dominated in every way. And the toughness factor, the physicality factor, the confidence, all of that, they need it to come from their leaders. And everyone struggled tonight in every way. So it's not just blaming one player. I'm not trying to pick on Cliff. Um, he plays his ass off every night. Um, he had 9 rebounds. Just shots weren't going in, and I just think that in addition, their transition game was negated more than I thought it would be against Illinois. So I think the size was an issue in terms of their guards, and that's obviously a concern in Big Ten play. So, you know, it's one game. I know some people will make a bigger deal about it as a long-term issue, and maybe there are some things that are going to be plagued all year. Um, but there's still time to figure it out, and I think rebounding is a huge part of it. Not a lot of rebounds coming from the wings tonight, and that's kind of been the case all year. Hyatt had 1 rebound, Woolfolk had 2, uh, Griffiths had 1. That's not good enough. It's not good enough, and they only had 3 players over 3. J. Mike had 3, Williams had 4. They're guards, and then Cliff had 9. So no one's rebounding enough, and they're going to get burned worse in the future with teams on the offensive glass. And Rutgers has to figure out a way to, on misses, to get offensive rebounds. So that's a huge key of it. Defensively, they allowed way too much in the half court. I think they just got discouraged. I think when their shooting was struggling, they did not play at the intensity level defensively that they have been. And Peichel more or less said that. So it's a work in progress. At the end of the day, they're 5-2. You're going on the road now. You have 2 huge opportunities. You got to split on the road next week. You can't lose both. If you lose both, and then you lose Mississippi State, you go 7-4 in non-conference. You're gonna be 7-5. Best case, if you lose those games, you win the others. LIU and Stonehill, which you got to. 7-5 going into the new year, and then the Big Ten schedule is brutal to start the new year. You're at Ohio State and at Iowa. Then you have Indiana, and then you're at is it Purdue? I say, or no, at Michigan State. So I said this in the preview or with Dave White this week. They could start Big Ten play 1 of 4. Then after that, they have Nebraska, and then they have Purdue, and they have somebody else really good too. So it's a challenging front-loaded schedule. I still have confidence that this team is going to get better as the season goes on, but they can't put themselves in a hole. And they have a chance to climb out of it a little bit next week. Wake Forest just, beat a top 30 Florida team in terms of KenPom at home. And then you have, Seton Hall, which is a huge opportunity. So both winnable games. I think both stylistically teams they match up with pretty well. Wake Forest is very skilled offensively. Seton Hall has less of a presence inside. So how do they respond? That's the biggest thing here. How do they respond as a team? How does the coaching staff respond? We'll find out a lot this next coming week. If it was a bad game, some people like to say burn the film. I think this is a game that you don't burn the film. I think you run it and run it and run it and really take away a lot of lessons from this game, because I think that there are examples in this game that they can get a lot better from. And we'll see. But overall, very disappointing opener. Shout out to the crowd. They were awesome when they had an opportunity to be. Rutgers now lost 4 in a row at home, dating back to last season. So that's a concern. So there's certainly an identity, I wouldn't say crisis, but they're being tested. They're being tested in terms of what this program has been successful at recently and what they're struggling with right now. So it's a big moment, I think, for this season and how they respond the rest of this month before Big Ten play resumes in January. You have 3 high major games coming up: Wake, Seton Hall, and then Mississippi State and neutral court. So you have no more high major games at home. Can you win away from the rack now? You got to. So we'll see what this team is made of. I'm still optimistic. Thanks for listening and watching once again.